Welcome to the new cyber frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new cyber frontier.
Welcome to New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Timothy Montgomery, and today we have with us Ed Gibbs. Mr. Ed. I'm sure you get that a lot, probably, right, Ed?
I do.
So, Mr. Gibbs, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Okay, so a little formal introduction. I think this is the first time I've got a chance to meet you. And it sounds like from what I did gather so far, you've done some podcasting yourself. So if you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself.
Sure. So, like I said, my name's Ed Gibbs. I've been in security for roughly 25, 30 years. I started out as a developer, writing kernel code and real-time OSs. Worked for Dow Jones, Lockheed, different places on some pretty sophisticated projects, and including encryption. And so went into professional services, started delivering the very first commercial firewall, which was digital SEAL, SEAL, running on OSF1. And we delivered that around the world. That was before checkpoints, secure computing. This was a 3-gated Unix system that you had the VI kernel files, rebuild the kernel, and set up your routing accordingly and hoped it worked. Beyond that, I moved into pre-sales in security for companies like Nokia, which we sold Checkpoint, and McAfee on the IPS side, as well as Cisco Systems, Symantec, Sky High Networks, which was a CASB solution, cloud access security broker. We were the first to market that. And all along the way, I kept up with development. I've managed small engineering teams. I was based out of Chicago for a little while. When COVID decided to pop up and chase everybody out the city. And so I went to work for a startup and kind of laid low from there. So this is where I am today. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, awesome. I was glad to have you. And we certainly are interested to hear what you as an individual, what the history you've got and the professional background there. I'm curious more or less, what's our topic of interest today, sir?
Yeah, one of the topics that I've been really focusing on lately is overexposure on the internet.
Okay.
And, we're not talking about people exposing themselves. But what we're talking about here is, the services and the infrastructure that enterprises have and how easy they've made it to find these services, down to things like even the version, the users, the domains that they're using internally are being exposed to the public. And it's just having the right resources and knowing where to look to find it. And what I'm finding is this pattern of behavior, I thought it peaked, and everybody's become hyper aware of security. It's been in the news a lot lately. Down to the layperson, right? They're asking questions. Yeah. And but when it comes to hyper exposure, it hasn't changed. And in fact, it's gotten worse. And I'll be glad to give you some examples of that as we continue our discussion. But I'm not sure what it's going to take to change that. We continue to talk about, but there's no action, right? And there's companies out there that specialize in collecting information about organizations, what applications they're using, what SaaS services, what routers they use, and down to everything you would ever want to know from a competitive standpoint, you can get.
Yeah, and it's readily available, almost public.
Exactly, right? Passive DNS is a great example of being able to find that information. And yeah, so you do your scans, you do your lookups and things, and I've written a library in Python that basically does I think it's the Lichtenstein algorithm for distance matching, pattern matching. And what I was able to find was absolutely amazing. And, if you ever wanted to know about anything about a company, it's out there.
Yeah.
And and they wonder how they got hacked, right?
Yeah, that's a good answer. I mean, one doesn't ever know. I mean, all simply don't understand what the components and how they end up being fleshed out publicly. So I think a lot of majority of organizations, they don't know what's out there for them to see. So gentlemen like yourself has the knowledge, goes in and starts plugging away at some things and happens to come across some stuff. And hey, did you know that it's quite possible to do this with it? And so
all of a sudden you got a very clear picture of the attack surface, what assets they own. And really finding that information has become very easy, particularly in the role I've been in as a security researcher. Typically working with organizations to expose that. And real quick, what's interesting is some of the CISOs I've met with, I've sent them this information. They asked for it, first of all, and I never hear back. And I don't see anything changing. I'll check back 3 months later, do another scan, and guess what? Nothing's changed. So it's like they put their head in the sand. I don't want to know this. Thank you very much.
You probably scare them, man. That's probably what it is. So right here, we're going to take a pause for our vendors for a commercial break here. So we'll put on a pause and we'll come right back with Ed and talk about how he's scaring a whole lot of CISOs these days. So we'll be right back.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
All right, welcome back to our show, New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery, and I'm speaking here today with Ed Gibbs, a gentleman that seems to have a whole lot of history for seems like the inception of the firewall almost, right, Ed? I mean, that's
pretty much, yeah.
And before the break, we were talking about how you were scaring the dickens out of all these CISOs and the relativeness of overexposure for machines and just networks in general, and the concept behind why in the world is this still out there. So, I mean, when you were talking about these CISOs, just seemed like they just didn't want to hear about it, or what do you think the reason for them not answering you might be?
I think when they look at this, it's a massive task because what are you supposed to do about it? You have all these systems in your infrastructure, these assets. It's not like you can change the names. A lot of these systems are hard coded in the applications. Within they rely on each other. There's interdependencies that use these names, and so to change all that would be a massive undertaking. And quite frankly, they may feel like they have higher priorities to take care of than dealing with this.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think a lot of times they look at it as something maybe insignificant, not necessarily speaking for the lowest guy on the totem pole that might recognize something like this inside their organization, bringing it up once or twice. But you're right, as they polarize or have to prioritize on what they do to day as far as budgets, and it just doesn't sink in, I think, a lot with, they may never get that 6th or 7th priority on their list ever. Per se, depending on the organization.
Right. You take an organization, I worked with a company in Chicago once. They had about 5,000 employees, and it came time to rationalize the software on the desktops. Yeah, that involved so many people, so many meetings.
Never agree on anything?
No, nothing. And worst of all, there was mergers and acquisitions that had different software and different things right on their desktops, and we could never agree on. I was there for the security portion of it, and we could never agree on the desktop solution to put in place because there was all these different requirements and things. So it just got ugly, and it felt like it was going down a rat hole quick. And so that was one thing. But with the information that's available on the internet about these organizations, whether you get it through a freeware source like DNS Dumpster or something like that, right? Or you're going to go out to these companies that sell their DNS databases. There's lots of information, because a lot of times these companies. I remember at one company I worked for in Liberty Lake, Washington. They were a AWS Gold partner, and they had some major clients. We're talking Fortune 500, right?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest challenges we had was trying to keep up with their AWS infrastructure and the changes that were going on almost hourly. We tried to automate the entire security process. I think we did a pretty good job. We did, first step, resolution a lot of times, first call, and all the way through to, root cause analysis and things. But where it got really complicated was these organizations that had third-party contractors. Now we're going into a very deep area, right? How do you work with third-party? Yeah. Well, they had to have access. They had to have, whether you did that through VPN or whatever you did, right? They were modifying rules. A lot of times these development third parties are the worst offenders because they're not thinking about security, and they're not thinking about, hey, if I call it this, it gives it away. I'll give you a simple example, right? I ran across this one organization. They had some Jenkins servers set up in AWS, and the FQDN included the name of it, what it was, what version it was, and everything. And it was that version that they were using was riddled with holes. and so it didn't take much to do that. And so the parent organization that hired the contractor, I sent him a letter saying, look, this is what's going on. Do you want to do something? Well, nothing happened for about a couple of months. I wrote another letter, included the CISO and the CEO, and I got a response. They had sent a letter to the contractor saying, you do this again, you're fired. And so that's what it took to get some action done, right? And so it was a major issue. And
you think that culture has a lot to do with whether or not these prioritizations don't reach the top?
Absolutely. Culture has a lot to do with it.
I think you're right about that. In my time being CISO and having to bring that to the forefront, my past is the big particular thing is they just don't have time for it, or it's not a priority until something major or drastic occurs.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden now we need to throw the whole entire kitchen sink at it because it needs to be fixed now, type of thing. It's a reactiveness, not a proactiveness, I would say.
That's right.
So there's not preventiveness in play with the culture that's there. So and a lot of companies, I think you see that a lot. What do you think? I mean, this culture idea, why being such a stick in the mud, basically, for your IT, your CIO, that gentleman or woman would be, they usually are about uptime, not necessarily downtime. And they critically look at cybersecurity as being us trying to drop, as you get into a security posture, it's all about limitations and boundaries and things. But I've never, in all my years, a few years that I've done metrics now, that I've ever had to worry about, I know there's downtime, but I've been able to work with the CIOs and be able to produce just how safe it is with uptime. So, and I've never understood why the culture seems to play such a hard, bank to to just allow on cybersecurity. And so that culture seems to play a big role, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think culture and the role they're in, right? You take application developers, with agile rapid development, right? They're running sprints, and
Yeah.
they got to get this code done, and they want to facilitate everything. They want to take shortcuts, maybe set up their own infrastructure.
Yeah.
They don't care what it takes. I got to meet this deadline.
Yeah.
And so they're not really thinking about security. They're not thinking
No.
about anything, right? And yeah, when you mention security, they're like, "Uh-oh." It's like the lawyers got involved.
Yeah, that's kind of what it said. Their face kind of dropped. Whoa. So,
Yeah, and but what they're doing is they're doing more harm than good. And eventually, one of the things that we took pride in at this cloud management company that I was part of is doing taking and assessing the infrastructure, starting with a clean foundation, and building up and optimizing it for the cloud, rather than try to do a one-to-one, migration from, say, a terrestrial data center to the cloud.
yeah.
And
Sometimes migrations like that are not worth it, right?
exactly, you're bringing a lot of overhead and things you don't really need anymore. And so having that, by doing those one-to-one migrations, what taught us a lot in the beginning is that we're going to have to band-aid a lot of things.
Yeah.
And when you start band-aiding stuff, you're putting the entire organization at risk. You might as well just hang a sign up and say, we're held together by wing nuts.
Yeah. It's also refreshing to have something that's an infrastructure that's not a trend or an infrastructure extension, but literally an old system and then builder of a new system, being able to dedicate, moving older applications and redeveloping them in a sense for the newer infrastructure. So, I mean, to me, it means more uptime, but
yeah,
I mean, that's
you're exactly right. To me, it means more uptime too. And I think the biggest challenge is, when you talk about security in the cloud, right? Just because you move to the cloud doesn't mean that you're secure at all.
Right.
And you're bringing the same baggage. You got everything, you got operating systems, you got everything else involved.
True.
And somehow they think that setting a default gateway of 0.0.0.0 is okay. I'm in the cloud. What could happen? And open up everything, right? Every port and whatever, doesn't matter. Yeah, and that's simply not the case, right? Especially with the overexposure of databases. And I can't tell you how many databases I've found in the last month that had no authentication or minimum default authentication.
Really?
Yeah. So what I did was I wrote some scripts. You'll love this. To go out, collect that information on what was running out there.
Yeah.
Take screenshots. Then try to automate the login process for each one, depending on what it was. I did the same thing for CCTVs about 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah.
I found 22,000 open CCTVs.
What?
Yeah. And so I
we're being hacked.
It's wide open.
It's a free-for-all. Right.
Exactly, right. And but one of the cool things too, just a little mention here that sometimes I get the opportunity to work with the FBI. I've worked with the U.S. Marshals. I did some training for the U.S. Navy, and everybody seems to be amazed and shocked, that this is going on and nothing, is really being done about it. So when you hear about critical infrastructure getting compromised. Yeah, exactly, right. Ransomware, whatever it is, right? It's happening, and we're in a sense allowing some of it or enabling some of it.
We are,
and we totally are, and it's made. It's good to be on the good side of the law, because I went to Loyola University, and I could have easily turned out on the other side somehow, and not be where I am today. But there
Lucky
are
to have you on
nefarious.
this side.
Yeah, the fact is, the world is always going to have nefarious actors, right? These
Yeah,
bad actors that they have
yeah,
no intention of doing anything but mischief,
right.
and they're out there exposing things. They're out there discovering. They're scanning. So a lot of the questions I get asked is, what if we don't do this, right? What if we don't protect our infrastructure? What's the cost?
Yeah,
Well, then that's a whole different discussion. That's
I think
very
we're gonna
complex.
find out soon enough. I think hospitals are really starting to feel. They seem to be the one in the news a lot of times. I mean, the oil industry there got zapped, but you don't hear that so often. You hear it more with the hospitals these days than anything. It seems to be in the news at least. I'm sure
Uh,
it's happening everywhere else as well, but
do
wherever
you
it
know
can be.
why hospitals are an easy target?
No, why?
I'll get from what I'll give you my perspective on it.
Okay.
When I specialized in healthcare when I was at Symantec, so I had some of the biggest healthcare organizations in the U.S. I was working with,
Okay.
and I'll never forget one of them I worked with. No names mentioned. Uh, had no segmentation whatsoever. They couldn't tell a user from a medical device, you know. And then when it came to medical devices, you couldn't modify them, and you
I bet
couldn't
they
touch
had
them.
embedded stuff. They basically had structure that wasn't dynamic.
Exactly.
Coding,
And so
change.
what we would want to do is, we're trying to set up proxies to segment the internal from external.
Yeah.
And we're also trying to set up encryption, uh, what was it? Decryption and encryption devices for
Yeah.
TLS SSL, right? On the network.
Tunneling.
And I couldn't do it because the networks were such a mess. And they were so afraid that they would bring the medical devices down. And so on those medical devices, typically if they were communicating over an SSL VPN or using SSL TLS communications, I wanted to be able to take that certificate off that device and import it into my proxy so I can decrypt it and see
Yeah.
what's going on. And because if that device is ever compromised, that's a clear channel out right there
Mm-hmm.
for data exfiltration and everything else, right?
Yeah. This thing will put out the in and out.
Exactly. And it's too easy to do. But I couldn't touch them. And I would say that they probably were about, if I had to measure it, I'd give them a 3 out of 5. And even after setting up everything,
Yeah.
I would give them a 3.5 out of 5.
That's awful.
Yeah.
Well, that's one prime example of why it's so easy to seem to be well, I won't call them the victims, but I just think that they did not. I don't think they put as much emphasis into understanding what type of structure they needed. So in the
That's right.
healthcare industry, they certainly went for the bot, I guess, experience. You bring your own device type scenarios, and they went so full force that they didn't. Perspective wise, it didn't seem like they put a lot of thought process into where that security and what levels of security they were going to imply. But they certainly reached their customer pretty good. So there's too many avenues there now. I mean, the just the rules of engagement is so. I mean, you can overwhelm a system pretty fast with not being able to plug them all. I think that though. I mean, today's I see a lot of transactions are trending for engineers to actually work in those fields to actually harden a lot of those devices today. So I think we're moving in that direction.
We are. It's going to take time.
We'll be right back with our guest there, Ed Gibbs, after a short break from our sponsors.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
All right, welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. In today's edition, I am your host, Timothy Montgomery, and today I'm here with Ed Gibbs, a longtime cyber professional in the field for more than 30 years. I almost want to say you invented the firewall. We'll just keep going until all of a sudden you good. You've got some books out there too. It sounds like you had some of those, and you're a podcaster too. And so just half a dozen things you do all day long and seem to just include everything in the facets of cybersecurity. So before we went on the break here, we were talking more about how the trends of hardening of healthcare industry and some of the devices out there, and basically that platform of overexposure as we go through dialogue here. So, I mean, the process of hardening something like that, device after device after device, I can only imagine the vendor set and the different factors that would have to go into just making sure that those devices, I always refer to them like the OT devices or Internet of Things type of devices. I mean, one example is the heart rate monitor that we use on our Fitbits, or these days you can actually insulin pumps and things of that nature have the ability to be monitored by your phone, which is Bluetooth in or wirelessly capable, that someone can disrupt, even with monitoring devices on hearts now, and those types of medical devices that are embedded inside of a human being and monitor, so that way the doctor can get real-time information from those patients that use those devices. And even those seem to be not necessarily as secure as they should be. So, I mean, I mean, how hard can it be to really get some of this stuff underway? I thought in the industry, as I said previous, that a lot of they're starting to push more towards hardening now. Do you see any trends in any other ways?
Yeah, I think that there is a strong initiative to secure medical devices, anything communicating with over the internet. It's not that they can't do it. Yeah. There's a certification process that they have to go through also.
That's right.
And that takes time, and 6 months to a year. So if you needed a medical device and you wanted it secure right away, chances are you're not going to be able to do it.
That's true. It takes a length of time. And then devices that are already out there that have passed without the standard, an implied hardening or software or security standard, maybe that security standard is now changing and making it harder to actually get through that 6 months too.
Yeah, so there's a lot to take into consideration. It's not just an easy statement, hey, let's secure our medical devices or have the vendor do it. We should have it a fix in a week. No, not going to happen. But if they can move that fast, that'd be amazing. But they can't. And, it's a challenge. And it comes back, when we talked about the overexposure, right? Particularly in the healthcare industry, you'd be surprised what you can find, communicating over the internet. And, there were some devices that I saw communicating in clear text.
Wow.
Yeah, that used APIs and things, right? Yeah, simply because I guess they didn't want to deal with the encryption layer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unbelievable. But when we talk about exposure also, it's not just DNS and being able to discover assets and things. Take for example, being able to look at things like who-is records on the internet, being able to do a reverse who-is and discover all kind of interesting things.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Particularly when a company has a good historical database that can go back many, many years. You can take an email address or a phone number, and all of a sudden you can find out that they've registered 8,000 domain names, and be able to build a pattern there, a profile of what they are. Yeah, so we did that quite a bit last year. We spent a lot of time going through domain names and pivoting off of fields within those records to figure out, who owned what and who was registering what. And we were able to see also that, the largest contributor, I think, to the problem today is
what?
Registers.
Really?
Yeah, when you look at, well, I probably shouldn't mention their names, but you take the the big registers out there, right,
Yeah.
around the world, and they allow bulk registrations, and that allows someone to register 300, 500. I've seen 3,000 domain names registered at once with no other purpose than to set up a scam or phishing attack or something. Or there was one I ran into that the names indicated the different stages of a malware campaign.
So you're saying with a little bit of know-how and understanding from the registrar's perspective, you could probably halt a lot of this activity that's trending in the wrong
Absolutely.
direction, right? Maliceness that's going on in the internet.
Yeah, there's some registers out there you have to apply as if you're applying for a business license,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But there's ones out there that
This,
it's the wild, wild west.
yeah.
Whatever goes. Yeah.
That's interesting topic. It's something that we should further explore. I think we're getting to the end of our podcast on this one, but maybe next time we can chat about what could be done and maybe what type of governance that the registrars might have to
Yeah, because
commit.
the way I see it is we're trying to approach the problem from the wrong end of it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're being, it's like being thrown in the universe and you got to figure out, all these stars instead of going to the creator of the stars and saying, okay, which ones are these? You
yeah,
know, yeah,
yeah, and you can approach it from multiple sides too. It's almost like we're not trying to approach it from inevitably what you can blatantly see is obvious. So that's just interesting.
right.
So,
Oh, yeah.
this overexposure that we've been referencing throughout the conversation here, um, I mean, like registers, that's just one of them. I'm sure you've probably thought through quite a few things that could be possible. With the perspective of culture and then the registers, those are two different things that, if you had a chance and thought we could, if you had to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden those two things stop to cease. Yeah, how much do you think that would actually take down in the everyday, like ransomware activity, things
Ooh.
of that nature?
I think it would reduce it significantly
Yeah,
because you look at .com is absolutely garbage now. Anybody can have a .com. Everything's mixed in.
yeah, everything. There's no
Yeah,
real. It's whatever frenzy you want to play into.
exactly right. So what is a trusted TLD? If you're familiar with that term, top level domain.
Yeah,
I don't know of any.
yeah.
Um,
And then
no,
how that would and what rule set would you give? And is there any actually true governance out there today that regulates such things?
right.
Those are
So
perspectives, right?
yep, you got it.
Yeah. So okay, so we're getting to the end of our podcast today, this session of New Cyber Frontier. Ed, any last words that you'd like to give to the audience as far as perspective, our summary of the three basic things you could think of? I think we talked about two of them there. What's another one there? Well, what would you summarize as saying that would prevent or, like you said, really reduce these
Well,
activities?
information is knowledge, right? But what do you do with that knowledge? You have to make it actionable. And I think that's where people start to get lazy, or organizations get lazy, is that they'll say, okay, well, we'll adjust this next year. We're doing a major data center upgrade right now. We don't have time for this. But the problem is some people out there do have time and it's the wrong people.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with the cultural change shift, I see that happening, trending in certain organizations. So, hopefully, that will shine more light on those perspectives of reprioritizing some of these things, right? So we
Right.
see the curve of information just be publicly accessible like that,
Yeah.
especially stuff that shouldn't be. So
Exactly right. And just real quick, when you do a scan, I put in keywords like ADFS, Okta, Salesforce, things like that, right?
yeah, just little
I built a profile of just about every SaaS service out there a company would use, and it's too easy.
it's giant, it's just a giant pivoting vulnerability.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's detrimental. That actually is I don't know. That I guess I'm not surprised, but it certainly
Yeah.
brings to mind that there's going to be there's going to be a lot of jobs, there's going to be a lot of opportunities out there still to be a cybersecurity professional, I guess. So
there is, but I still think a lot of companies don't want to spend the money either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're still not quite there yet. I know I saw it trending over the last decade, though. We've heightened, we've gotten to new expectations. I think finally. I mean, there was some nosedives in there for the last two decades, but I think we're really making headway on this one in the cybersecurity community. So maybe I'm wrong. I'm just seeing it from my little world I'm in. So,
yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Ed, for being on our show today, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about some of the things you might think that were important in today's world, as far as the overexposure. That's something I haven't heard before, and certainly we'll probably take a look at it more in detail. But that's a good way of stating it too. So thank you for being on. And this will mark the end, I guess. So thank you everyone for listening to New Cyber Frontier, and this will end our podcast for today. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery, and I hope everybody has a good cyber day.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.